Nasa is Rosh B'nai Gershon Gam Heim count the B'nai Gershon, also them, and my father-in-law, the leader of our generation, examines and analyzes in the Maimer of the year Tafshin Daled Vahi B'Shloishim Shana, which was 30 years prior to when the Rebbe said this Maimer in Tafshin Lamed Daled, that it says Benegel L'Seder Ksuvim Elam Elu, concerning the order of these psukim when he talks about the different countings of the different shvatim of the different mishpachas of the Bnei Levi. So he goes on and says, when it comes to the count of the from 30 years and up, that the way how he counts, it's according to the order of their avodah. First, it says at the end of last week's parsha, the end of Parshas Bamidbar, count the heads of the Bnei Kahas, which is the ones who would carry the Aron, as we're going to explain soon. And afterwards, it continues at the beginning of our parsha, count the heads of the Bnei Gershom, also them. The order is, first they counted the family of Kahas, then the family of Gershon, and then the family of Merari. That this order is not in their birth order, which the birth order of these three heads of families is Gershon was oldest, second one was Kahas, and the third one was Merari. Like was taught at the beginning of the previous parsha, Parshas Bamidbar, when it talks about the count, that they counted the Levium from a month old, and you see over there that first is counted the Bnei Gershon, then the Bnei Kos, and then the Bnei Merari. So therefore, we need to understand why was it changed the order in their second count? The count for their avodah, which is from 30 years and up, then their first count, when we counted them when they were born, or according to their birth, from 30 days and up. And the Rebbe says, to note, this question arises specifically at the beginning of Parshas Nosei. At the end of Parshas Bamidbar is only related the mitzvah or the command concerning the counting the Bnei Kahas. So then we don't know yet anything about out of order, in order. All we know is about the Bnei Kahas being counted. Only afterwards, at the beginning of our Parsha, Parshas Nosei, that we see it says to count the heads of the families of Gershon. After he says to count the heads of Kahas. So then the question arises that it's not in the order of their birth. So that's why the question is specifically in this parsha, not in the end of last week's parsha. Moisif and the Friedrich Rebbe adds in his Maimer be'emes, in truth, not only is it that the order is that in the second time around when he counted them, that the Bnei Gershon are the second ones to be counted because the Bnei Kahas were counted first. Even more so, they are not just second, but they are ancillary. They're of lesser importance to the Bnei Kahas concerning the counting. The Mikra Molib Gibrakas of the Pasuk said it explicitly. Nasa is Rosh Bnei Gershom Gam Heim. Count the Bnei Gershom also them. Kipirish Rashi Bnei Kahas. Rashi explains, why do we say Gam Heim? Gam Heim means just like I commanded you to count the Bnei Kahas, so also the same way you should count the Bnei Gershom. But by using the term gamheim, the mashmad seems to indicate she'ikerein anesias roish b'bnei kos. The main idea of the counting is by the bnei kos. Al bnei gershon hine gamheim noses roish. The bnei gershon they also are the ones that have to be counted. Behind this means shalulei zois, if not for the fact that he has to tell you that it is if not for the fact that the Bnei Gershon are somehow ancillary to the Bnei Kos, Yesh Solka Daitoch, there is a Havamina, there is a possible way of thinking, She'etzel Bnei Gershon lo yeklal in the Nesias Rosh, that by the children of Gershon there won't be at all the idea of Nesias Rosh. They wouldn't have counted them at all. Af al pi shebeseder toldoisam koidem gershon l'kahos, top of the next page. Even though that when it comes to the order of how they were born, we say that kahos is second, follows the bnei gershon. But when it comes to counting, who knows? If they weren't if the bnei gershon wouldn't be secondary to the bnei kahos, so maybe we wouldn't have counted them at all. In other words, if they wouldn't be ancillary to them, if they wouldn't be bottled to them. So therefore, that makes the question even more difficult. Why is it so? Second line on page Yud Beis, we could add to this, Badrushim was brought down to Vamodim, Shatoiri, Nitzkis Torah is everlasting, Vahainu, this means, though the command to count the Levim, the actual count, Hoyerak Pamachas took place only once. When did it take place? Like we have at the beginning of last week's Parsha, B'chodesh Hasheni, in the second month, meaning the month of Iyar, B'shana Hasheni, in the second year, let's say, from Mitzrayim, to when they went out of Mitzrayim. So seemingly it was a one-time event. It's not an ongoing thing that took place annually and so on. The Levim were counted only then. In the Kivim Shatorah in Nitzchi, since the Torah is everlasting, there is these very same matters, the way they are in the spiritual sense, by an everlasting way, by every individual, and every time and every place, there's the idea of the counting of the Levim. Even though it's way after the second year going out of the land of Mitzrayim, and I might not be a Levi as well, there's still this the way it applies to me. Moving for this understood, that just like the general idea of counting is to be found by every Yid in every place and every time, also Shagambak Domas Kahos Lagershon, also in the fact that when it came to count, the Kahos was before Gershon. Though it's the opposite of the order of their birth, there's an everlasting lesson in our service of why and what it teaches us in our Avodas Hashem that the Bnei Kos preceded the Bnei Gershon. The idea behind this is the two orders that we mentioned before, either the way they were counted at the beginning of Chumash Bamidbar, Gershon, then Kos, then Merari, versus the way they're counted now. First Kahos, then Gershon, then Merari, are two manners, two approaches in two ways of the service of Hashem. There is a way of a service of Hashem, Shilafi Seder Toldosom, Shal Gershon, Kos, and Merari, that follows the order of their birth of the Gershon, Kos, and Merari. What do they indicate? Gershon hu inyan gerushin. Gershon is from the idea of chasing out. And Moshe Kosev, like it says, Vayigor Shehu Vayelach. He chased him out and he went. Shezeu inyan sur merah. That's the idea of turning away from bad. Shemarchik v'doiche u'megarish u'menas hara. A person distances and pushes away and chases away from him the bad. Since this avodah is with the lowest of the low, that's the idea of chasing out the bad. That's why it's Gershon is with a long nun, meaning the nun that reaches down below the line. The fact that the nun reaches below the line, and end nun reaches below the line, indicates that it reaches to the lowest place. Hashemis sheyesh b'sifrei Hashemis sheyesh Gershon v'Gershon, that there is written in the books of names, that there's Gershon with a final mem and there's Gershon with a final nun. Shem Shnei Shoinis Shoinim. These are two separate names. They're not the same name but spelled differently. Sometimes we find in the Torah that certain names are the same name, but they are spelled differently. There's actually a Ramban, last week's parsha, that speaks about El Yosef ben Deuel, El Yosef ben Reuel, that the Deuel and Reuel is the same person, and the names mean actually the same thing. It's a different discussion. But the point is that we find that you could have the same name spelled differently. In this case, the Rebbe is emphasizing that Gershon and Gershon are two separate names because they're two separate messages, two separate ideas. The Rebbe continues in line 21, Lahoira is to indicate that's drawn down and comes till below in the lowest matters, to chase them away and to push them away. So that's Gershon. Gershon is Sur Merah, pushing away the lowest of the low. Then the next step is in Avodah 23. Inyan Kahos. What's the idea of Kahos? Maloshem v'lo yikas hamim. That to him nations will collect and gather. What does that mean? The idea of gathering. He says, first of all, Kipirish Rashi Asifas Amim, like Rashi explains that yikas means in the word the gathering of nations. What does that mean in our avodah, in the spiritual aspect? It's the idea of refining the sparks of holiness, that they are scattered and separated amongst the nations. That these sparks are found very much below. And from there, their very low place, we extract and we gather them. Like it says in Miyah, the Chacham would say, if your scattered ones, if your pushed away ones will be at the ends of the heavens, in other words, very far away, from there, Havai, your God, will collect you. From there, he will take you. That's the idea that Mashiach will collect and gather the scattered Yidden, which is also referring to not just the scattered Yidden, literally Yidden, but also refers to the scattered sparks that will be collected. And it says Misham Daike. It says that from there. What is the idea from there? That just say that Hashem will collect them. What's the from there? Look at the Torah, like it's explained. Look at the Torah. The area and the residence of Klippus is called over there. It's very deep below. That's why it says the Alter Rebbe, the Torah speaks of you have to search out from there Havai your God, meaning even when a person is very low below. Yet, top of page Yud Gimel, miyad kishenoi deloi sheyesh no nitzas kedusha boisem makim, as soon as he becomes aware that there's a spark of holiness in that place, in that very far away place, sham, very deep. The very fact that he became aware of this spark, is because this spark has a special association with his soul. That's why he's aware of it. So he should be the one to elevate it. So this person that becomes aware of it descends over there, so he refines and purifies and clarifies and elevates that spark. Now, by the way, from my own mind, I'm thinking the Rebbe doesn't mean that literally that the person becomes aware of the spark, but every person that knows Chassidus knows that there's sparks in everything, and he becomes aware of something that he needs to take care of. That means that he became aware of there's a spark over there with his name on it. So he says in line 5, the general idea of the collection and the elevation of the sparks of holiness is the idea of asay toiv, doing good. Before we were talking about Gershon is the turning away from bad, chasing it away, kicking it out, and asay toiv is the gathering. So now the Rebbe adds to the word, to the meaning of asay toiv, something that the Rebbe often says about the word asiyah, that it means coercion. Asay daike. Specifically, it says asay toiv. What's the emphasis on the word asay toiv? The word asay that Rebbe always brings down indicates coercion. Like it's explained, like it's brought down in the Gemara, the idea that one could coerce someone to give tzedakah under certain circumstances. So we see that the term me'asim or ma'asim, asay, has to do with coercion. Let's explain in Chassidus that that's the idea of ma'asim, that we are coercing and we are doing something that is the opposite of what would be the normal way of doing things. So he says, in our case, what does that mean, the asay toiv? What is the coercion over here? So he says in line 9, V'hainum, she'inyan zeu ba'ofen shel asiyah v'kfiyah. This idea is in the way of doing and coercing himself. L'fi shetzarich lahoyrid atzmei lavid mamata. He needs to lower himself to work with the below, k'dei lahalis nitzoyt sakdusha shenimtzayim sham, to elevate the sparks of holiness that are located there. After there are the matters of service of Gershon and Kahas. In other words, the pushing away bad and the elevating of the sparks, that's a general avoid of turning away from bad and doing good. Then we come to the idea of merari, it's the idea of bitterness and being upset. Not, heaven forbid, the idea of depression. Rather the idea of bitterness. Where does the bitterness come in over here? He's doing surmera, he's doing asay toiv. What is he bitter? I know this means though the turning away from bad and the doing good, he's not doing it completely. Then even the way he is supposed to do it, in other words, the way Hashem wants him to do it, beyond the general idea of perfection. It's the way that matters for his nefesh that he has to accomplish. Still, in all Mekol Makim, who mismarmer alzeh, he's still bitter over the fact he did not reach the ultimate perfection in the service. To be joined with Hashem, with the Torah and Hashem in a way that is entirely one. In other words, there's a way how a person could be, for example, fulfilling Hashem's will. He could be like a Merkava, for example. It could be like a chariot to the divine. And then there can be a complete oneness. So he's bitter over the fact that despite his doing his avoid of Sur Merabah Seitov, he hasn't yet reached a complete unity with Hashem. So therefore, now we can understand why we say Gershon, Kahas, and Merari, the way they were born, the original count in the beginning of Chumash Bamidbar, that because this is the avodah, so b'chlalus in general, harei say that avodah malmata l'mayla, this is the order of the avodah from below to above. Tchilas or mara, initially turning away from bad, v'achar kasei toiv, and afterwards doing good. So he continues in the next paragraph, line 24. So this is all the way it was, the counting according to their birth. But earlier we said that the other count, the count at the end of the parsha and the beginning of our parsha, where it talks about first Kahas, then Gershon, then Merari, it's Kefi Seder Avoidosam. It's according to their avodah that they have to do in the Mishkan what they're supposed to be doing. So that's what we're going to talk about now. Line 24. There's also the order of the avodah in the Mikdash. Koilul Gam Mishkan Dikra Migdash, including also the Mishkan that's called a Migdash. Shascholihi Binyan Torah, at the beginning of the avodah when it comes to the Migdash, as well as the Mishkan, which is also known as the Migdash, like it says Vasli Migdash. Where does it begin? It begins with the Torah. Shezau in Yon Shalom Migdash. The idea of the Migdash and the Mishkan is Torah. How do we see that's the concept of the Mishkan and the Migdash? K'mayim and Chazal state, Mishkadav Beis HaMikdash, once the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Ein La Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'ilam Be'el Arba'am Shalach Atap Yudal that Hashem only has in this world the 4 cubits of Allah. That means, from the fact that you are replacing the Migdash with the 4 cubits of Allah, so that shows that what is the Beis HaMikdash? It's the place of Torah. When you don't have the Beis HaMikdash, so then you have the halacha. And we see this also as far as what is the holiest area in the Beis HaMikdash, V'ikar HaMikdash Hu Kodesh HaKadoshim, the primary place of the Mikdash. The primary idea of the Mikdash is the Holy of Holies. That in it was the Aron, the Ein Bar Rak Shnei Luchos, and all there was in the Aron was only the 2 Luchos, Shezau Inna Torah. So that's the Torah. So the center and most important part, when we're talking about the Migdash and the Mishkan, that's Torah. The Kasher Aschali b'Torah, when we begin with Torah, so then the order of our avodah is a different type of order. Then the avodah is in the way of going from below to above. Beforehand, we were talking about from below to above. First, you get rid of the bad, then you do the good, and then the person is examining and looking at where he's holding at with his spiritual state and so on. And he's upset about it, and he's bitter about it. But over here, we're talking about a different way, the Torah's approach. Torah was given from above, and Torah goes in a way from above to below. Shezeu Seder the Kahos, Gershon and Merari. That's the order of first Kahos, then Gershon, and then Merari. Kivishin Nimnu Lefi Seder Avodah and Mishkan. The way they were counted according to the order of the Avodah in the Mishkan, like we said before, that Kahos were the ones like with the Kedisa and Medrash, like it's brought down the Medrash. Lefi Shahaya Kahos Toyina Aron Sheshama Toydam. Since the job of the family of Kahos was that they were the ones that would carry and transport the Aron, that the Torah is located in the Aron. So therefore, even though earlier we went according to the order of their birth and Gershon was counted first, but since Kahos carried the Torah, which is, like we said, the highest level, the source level, so the Pasuk said Kahos, in our latter count, according to the Avodah, Kahos came first. Initially he said, count the heads of the Bnei Kos. Only afterward he says, count the heads of Bnei Gershon, because for the sake of the honor of the Torah, and because of the sake of the honor of the Torah, he says, Kahos first, because that is an avodah Momai Lamata, that comes first. Tomorrow we're going to talk about that these 2 avodas of Momai Lamata, Momata Lamailo, is the difference between Torah and Tefillah, as we've had in a few Mamarim previous to this. That Torah is the idea of the Hamshacha that comes from above to below, like Mishamai, Mishmachas, Koile, Hashem spoke to us from the heavens, whereas Tefillah is the Sulam, which is of art, so the ladder that's standing on the ground, that's going upward, so that's the avodah of Momata Lamailo, which is indicated by the birth order of Gershon, then Kahos, then Merari.